Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Brief delay on the muting there. Welcome, Jason Carl, to D&D Deep Dive, DM Deep Dive at D&D at a Castle. There's a lot of D's in that sentence. Thank you for coming and telling us all about your dungeon mastering at D&D at a Castle.
Sarah, thank you so much. I really appreciate the invitation to be here and talk with you today, and to anyone who's interested in what I'm doing behind the DM screen.
Yes,
It was
very much.
it was wonderful to see all those clips just now from D&D in the Castle. So many cool memories
So many
of those
memories. Every time I
tables.
watch them, I'm like, oh, I want to go to the castle.
Oh yeah, right. But I am, so it's okay.
Great.
Relax.
Well, that's
Well,
great.
I'll see you there in October. It's
You
okay.
will, you will. So for those watching, Jason Carl is one of our dungeon masters at D&D the Castle. He will be with us for 2 rounds this fall, October 28th to November 1st, and then November 4th to the 8th. And there are a couple of seats left at his table if anyone watching is interested in trying out Jason Carl's Dungeons and Dragons game. So, Jason, you are mostly known as a vampire, and so I love you to tell us how you are involved in Dungeons and Dragons, what your experience is with that, what your history is with that game.
Oh, absolutely. I've been involved in Dungeons and Dragons as a player and a fan, as a dungeon master for approximately 1,012 years, or however long the game has been in existence. I forget, really. Who can say? But for a long time, ever since I was a young person. And the the thing to marvel at, I think, about D&D is its absolute expansiveness and its resiliency. You can tell so many different kinds of cool stories in Dungeons and Dragons at a table with your friend. And what's better is that you're creating those stories together, and you know where they start, but you have no idea where they end. And that's one of the things I love most about it. I started like everyone does, as a player. In high school, I happened to see a player's handbook tucked under the arm of some classmate as I was passing in the halls in junior high, and I said, "That looks really cool. Would you show me what it is?" He very graciously said yes, and here I am. Along the way, I was lucky enough to actually write professionally for Dungeons and Dragons for a number of years at Wizards of the Coast. That was the 3rd edition of the game. I wrote a lot of Forgotten Realms books and some core books as well. It was the achievement of a lifelong dream, but not all my lifelong dreams. The castle is definitely part of those dreams. So,
Very cool. So Forgotten Realms then. So that's your area of expertise then, or what do you
not
usually like to get into when
really,
you do
not
D&D?
really. I do know a lot about the realms, but I am not an exhaustive subject matter expert the way some of our professional DMs are. Uh, I gravitate more towards settings like Ravenloft, which are gothic horror fantasy set in the Dungeons and Dragons milieu. I really like where those stories take us. I like the desperate heroism, the dark moral dilemmas that can lead to good or bad outcomes, depending on what the player choices are. And I like exploring those themes in a fantasy setting. So most of my Dungeons and Dragons campaigns and adventures tend to be down that darker path. You mentioned vampires at the start of this conversation. You see what I did there? Now we're back at the vampires, right?
Yeah,
Because that's where
well,
they come in.
absolutely. And is that the kind of game that you're planning to run this fall?
Yes and no. Yes, but no. I'm running 2 games this fall,
Mhm.
and one of the games, I believe there's a couple of seats still left, and
Excellent.
yes, that is definitely set in Ravenloft, and if you want, I'll tell you a little bit about it. I
Yeah, tell
think
us a little teaser with no spoilers, but a little
some of
what
my
our appetite.
players I see may be watching, so I have to be careful about what I say. Um, this is because this game takes place over the Halloween weekend, right? We're in the
Yeah,
castle right over Halloween. I've
Halloween
decided to
Castle.
tell a very classic ghost story in the Dungeons and Dragons format. So we're drawing on really classic ghost tales like Edgar Allan Poe and Henry James and Ambrose Bierce, and really weird, cool, spooky tales like that, but also more modern ghost stories. Ghosts are very popular these days, as you know. Everyone loves a good shiver, especially at Halloween time. And so we're going to incorporate some of those themes of dread and suspense and spookiness, but we'll do it in a D&D style, which means still Dungeons and Dragons. You are still playing paladins, clerics, wizards, druids, Aasimars, and tieflings, but you're encountering Dungeons and Dragons within this dark Ravenloft setting for a classic Halloween tale. I think my players know what to expect. At least they say they do. We shall see. And I think one of the best things about stories like this, again, is that you know where they start. I know where the story begins. I have no idea where it ends because that's up to the players. They will make the choices as they encounter these ghosts, these vampires, these spooks. They'll decide what happens next. They'll have difficult moral choices. They'll have exciting NPCs to talk with and encounter. They'll have amazing combats to experience. But the course of the story and where it takes us is totally in their hands. I'm almost there as an interpreter of the world. I know what the world wants. I know what the bad guys want, and they want terrible, terrible things. It's up to the players to deal with these situations and stop those bad guys if they want to. Was that helpful at all?
That's super helpful. That's great to hear. We just had a comment come in. Sounds amazing. I'm a big fan of all of Jason's work. Being both a vampire and D&D RPGer for many a year, I'd love to be part of Jason's D&D table in a castle in my home country, no less. Oh, wonderful! So we're a British player. That's awesome.
Fantastic. What are you waiting for? Come join us. I think there's a couple of spots at that table still left.
Spots in the fall. So there is a link up in the corner of this screen where you can click through to read mostly about Jason, but also you can click through to register for the rounds where Jason is going to be and sign up for his table there so you can learn.
Please do take the opportunity to join us. I'm really looking forward to this story. This is the first time I've done a classic ghost story in Dungeons and Dragons, and Halloween just seems the perfect time to do it. This is, of course, the time of the year when the veil between the worlds is thin, as they say. And who knows what may happen at our table.
And this is a very haunted castle. You've picked not just the time of year, but a great location for this. This is one of the most haunted castles in Britain, or is renowned to be. And we've certainly had many a ghost sighting. Have you ever seen any ghosts at the castle, at Lumley Castle?
I don't know what I saw. Let me put it that way. I like to think I have an open mind. And I've certainly had a healthy interest in ghosts in the Outre all my life that infuses my dungeon mastering. And I have seen a few strange things that I couldn't easily explain at Lumley Castle. If you're into ghosts, I think you will have a hard time avoiding them there rather than the opposite, which is great because maybe a ghost will come and participate in our story, which wouldn't be
the first time. We've certainly had experiences. People have definitely had experiences, and there are certain corners of the castle that you can go to if that's your interest, and that you can stay away from if it is not.
Or not, or not, as the case may be.
We've got you in the deep dark basement. We've got you in the actual dungeons for these rounds to keep it on brand, on theme for our Halloween castle. We have a guest saying hello. So hello, welcome.
Oh, hello. Hi. Hello, Philippe. How are we?
We're here chatting with Jason, who's going to be at our fall castle end of October, beginning of November. And dndinacastle.com is where you can go to find all that. Scan the QR code in the corner. Speaking of Lumley Castle, you've been there a few times,
yes,
at different times of the year. Tell us about your experience with D&D in a Castle, how you came to be there, what your impressions were in the beginning, and how they have changed over the years of coming to the castle as a dungeon master.
Wow. Why don't you pick a hard question? Gosh, Tara. I think, like everyone else, my first experience was being just completely overwhelmed and blown away by how utterly cool it is. As Americans, we don't have castles as such. And it is just a thrill to be in an actual historical setting that was used for the purpose you're talking about in your story, to be in its walls, to be able to touch the stone, the centuries old doors, and to imagine what not only it must have been like historically for the people who lived there, worked there, but also for the stories that you're telling, because let's face it, D&D games have a lot of castles in them. So to actually be in one, to be able to explore it and set your story there is so atmospheric, it's almost a little overwhelming at first. Once you're used to that, then you can appreciate all the cool nuances, right? Lumley Castle is a remarkable place. It's just brimming with history, and there are opportunities to do things outside the D&D table if you really, I mean, I don't know why you would, but if you want to, you can. And many of those activities are related to the life and times of the castle itself. Over the years that I've been coming back, I think has it changed all that much? I mean, it's 1,000-year-old castle. I'm not sure how much it's allowed to change. I think what's changed mostly is my appreciation for it, which has deepened. Every year is a great experience. The staff is always wonderful. They go out of their way to make us feel welcome in their castle. And I don't know, it's hard to imagine a more atmospherically appropriate place to have a Dungeons and Dragons game,
I've got a question.
Especially in the basement.
Especially in the those are real. Those basements are like legit. Hey, they are like
Oh
catacombs.
yeah.
Yeah, they're dark, very thick walls,
You
all the
you
things.
really get the immersion in those. It's
Mhm.
super cool.
Someone's asked, what D&D party classes would Jason think are most appropriate for taking on his spooky menagerie?
So that's a
Background
wow,
classes?
what a good question. I'll try to give you a good answer. If I've done my job right as a dungeon master, it doesn't matter. The choice is yours. If you want to play an Asmar paladin or a tiefling warlock, if you want to play a halfling rogue, or if you want to play a high elf bard, whatever your coolest character concept is, it will work with my story. The story is already running before you get to the table. I start my story work from three directions simultaneously. I start from the players. I try to talk to the players before we begin and find out what their preferences are. Do you like exploration? Do you like mystery? Do you like combat? Do you like role playing? And try to bring as much of those preferences into the story as possible. And the second point I start from, I'm building a little triangle on the screen here, are the characters. What have you chosen to play? What's your dream character? What have you always wanted to play in this kind of setting, but maybe haven't had the chance to? What's your favorite kind of character that you return to over and over again? Try to incorporate those characters in the backgrounds. And then on this third point of the triangle, we'll put it over here, are the villains. Because the best D&D stories have great villains. I know what the villains want. I know what they're prepared to do to get it. I know what they won't do. And I know what they will do when they encounter the player characters. Starting with those 3 points of the story triangle, that's where we begin. So you can play whatever you want at my table. You're going to have a good time.
You
I promise
mentioned.
you.
Oh, I have no question that to be a great game. You mentioned, the player preferences is between, the pillars of combat versus role play
Yeah,
versus exploration. Is there one that you say you naturally gravitate towards? And I know you're an
I
experienced
think
game
so.
master, but we all
Yeah.
have our things that we're drawn more to.
I gravitate a little bit more to role playing in the theater of the mind. I think that combat and exploration are really important pillars and definitely have their place in the game. I like them to occur when it's dramatically appropriate for the player's decisions, but I treat them all, I guess, as dials or levers, and they can be dialed up or dialed down to suit what the players prefer. But I personally do tend to gravitate more toward the role playing pillar. And I find that when player characters and their players behind them are having fun with the role playing, the exploration and the combat just sort of flows naturally out of that.
Mm. What do you think makes a great game of D&D? What is it about what's a feature that when you look back on a game of D&D and you think that was a great game? What do you think it is that makes that? What's the thing you're looking for in that game for it to satisfy that desire for a
I'm.
great game?
It's not a fair question, so I'm not going to give you a fair answer. What makes a great game of D&D is when everybody stands up from the table at the end and says, "Can we play again?" That's when you know it was good. Dungeons and Dragons, we're celebrating the 50th anniversary at the castle this year. As you know, this is 50 years of Dungeons and Dragons, and there are so many different ways to play this game. It's quite staggering and very impressive, right? I think the best games of Dungeons and Dragons are those that meet the player's expectations. If they come in expecting, an epic throwdown battle against the gods where the fate of the world hangs by a thread, they experience that, it's been a great game of D&D. If they are expecting a dark and tragic romance in Barovia against the dread vampire lord, and that only they can confront, and they have that confrontation, it's a great game of D&D. If they just want to explore, the frog marshes of the Sunken Tower for an afternoon and enjoy each other's company in a very casual way, that's also a great game of D&D. See, it's not a fair question.
It's not a fair question.
It's really not.
We get different answers from everybody, People, they sit down and they're like, what I want is just to laugh really hard. So if they laugh really hard, they feel it's
not helping me.
Now
I am running a second
cry
game.
really hard, and then it's a great game of people have a different sort of interest, but I suppose if you get what you want out of the game, then that's what makes it great.
I think so too. I'm running a second game table at the castle. I think it's full. I think it's sold out. I'll give you just a quick hint of what it's at. And again, I think some of those players may be watching here, so I don't want to say too much. I've gone in a different direction, away from the spooky. I know, right? Who am I? What is this? What have you done with Jason Carl? I am going to the Feywild, and the theme is a masquerade ball in the court of the Autumn Fairy Queen.
Oh my gosh, you have my heart already, Jason.
There may be a seat at the table. I'm not sure. The characters have been invited to the Feywild to participate in a masquerade ball in the court of the Autumn Queen, and of course, mayhem will ensue. Now, because I am who I am, there will be an element of Spooky and Ravenloft combined with the Feywild. Feywild, Ravenloft. Okay, it's a Favenloft game. I don't think I could leave the spooky behind completely, even if I wanted to. It's probably, there's probably a requirement in my infernal contract. But I think that this will be something different than I've tried before, and I hope the players will love it.
That sounds really cool, and I cannot guarantee that I will not crash your game as the Fairy Queen. I'm just saying, I can't make any promises that won't happen.
I mean, don't threaten me with a good time.
On Masquerade, all of the bits, there just might you might come back from lunch and there just might be a masquerade ball happening in your room.
I think that how we suffer. I don't know.
How we suffer, forced to attend a
how we
masquerade
suffer,
ball.
I don't know. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Don't answer that. Don't answer that.
That's not a good question, Jason.
Nobody wants to know the answer to that question. Moving right along,
Moving right along. Faye the Masquerade.
Faye the Masquerade. Yes. Faye the Masquerade. Something like that. We'll see. But again, I don't want to give too much of it away because I know my players are going to see this.
This is going to be a lot of fun. And in your dark and spooky games, is there still room for humor? Like, we all know about your dark side, but are you a table that's a lot of laughter, or are you more a table that's a lot of tears, or are you more a lot of tables that's a lot of jump scares, or some combination?
There's always a combination. And again, I think it's important to be flexible as a dungeon master and understand what your players are expecting from the experience. I find that the tone sets its own level. You'll know where the tone is going fairly fast. But even in horror games, even in dark, spooky stories, I think there's always room for humor. Humor relieves tension. Humor is a great counterpoint to the scariness that's happening. And it can be a stress relief as well. I think that at the game that the campaign I ran most recently at the castle, we had laughter, we had tears, we had jump scares, we had shivers, we had shakes, something for everyone, really. And it was a 3-day emotional roller coaster of a story that the players essentially created. I was there to interpret the world and the villains, but the characters, through their players, made those choices.
Do you ever participate in the other stuff that goes on at the castle?
Occasionally, I have. I've been involved in a group dance to summon a spirit once, maybe, perhaps. Does that sound familiar? I do recall that. I recall an escape room where I was, nearly, locked away and lost forever, which, come to think of it, could have been problematic, but that was good. I certainly love hanging out with my players and all the other tables players. There's a great social element to the castle too, at meal times and after the games, and in the interstitial times between. I think that's a big part of it too. Every castle run, as we call it, every castle period, always comes together as a community.
Yeah.
And sometimes that community can form very tightly because you're sharing not quite a common experience. Every campaign is different at every table, but you're all playing D&D in a castle, and everyone loves to compare stories about what they're doing in their games, and I really love that part too. And you get to meet people from, well, all over the planet, really, and find out how they got into D&D and how long they've been doing it and what their favorite things are. Um, that's very special. It's a
Yeah.
unique experience. I don't think there's anything else quite like it.
Yeah, it's one of the only places you walk through the hallway and every conversation you can hear is about D&D. Like everyone, it's the place where you're allowed. I always say it's the place you're allowed to talk about your homebrew for as long as you want to, and people actually want to hear you.
Oh yeah, I mean, to be fair, I don't really think they could stop you, but
That's the thing. That's true.
I
But
guess they could walk away. Oh, well, that was a very nice comment. Thank you, thank
I'm gonna
you,
read it
Mr.
out loud.
Lamb. I look forward to seeing you at the autumnal Fay Ball
Yeah, says can
this
really recommend
November.
Jason as a GM. Can confirm tears, laughter, and overall incredible experience when we visited last year. Get yourself to Barovia if you get a chance. Yes, oh, come to Barovia. We'll totally let you go at the end.
Oh yeah, you say that now, but yeah. Oh, I hope a couple more players do join. This ghost story is going to be so much fun. This
It
little
does sound like
Ravenloft
so much fun.
Halloween tale. I can't
If this
think of a
sounds like
better
fun
way to
to you,
celebrate Halloween.
this sounds like a fun way to spend your Halloween and you're watching, you can
Yeah,
find Jason at the links on the screen. You can also just go to
yeah, please do.
dndandacastle.com and have a look around at what the event is like. Would you say the people at D&D in a Castle, the players, what are the players like? Like who comes to D&D in a Castle? Because I can say who I
Oh,
think of, but it's more meaningful coming from you. Who are these
I
people?
mean, who
Who knows?
who knows? No, 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 no. I think you have a perspective that probably allows you to have a broader view. Even though we meet everyone, we don't get to spend as much time with everyone as we would like. We get to know the people at our tables most intimately, of course, but we don't always get to know in detail who people are during the course of it. But I think the people who come, there's so many different kinds of people who are all looking for something different. For some people, this is a bucket list item, and they're here because they have loved D&D maybe all their lives, or maybe they just started a couple of years ago. They saw an actual play show or saw D&D on Stranger Things and they got hooked. Or maybe they just started during the pandemic because it seemed fun and creative to do something with their friends, and now it's a big part of their lives. And they've always wanted to do this kind of destination vacation because you're in England, you're in D&D in a castle, but you could combine that with a trip to London or Bath or did I say it right, Tara?
You
Bath?
can do it both, depends where you're from.
You
Both are
could
acceptable.
we're not that far from Bosworth Field. You can look for Richard III's crown in the mud if you wanted to. So this is a destination bucket list item for them, plus D&D. And I think there are people who return every year to the castle. This has become an important part of their hobby life or their recreation. This is just something they do every year as a fun vacation treat. Um, there are groups that play together away from the castle all year long, and yet come to the castle to play together there. Bringing a new dimension to the experience. I think the only real commonality is that everyone loves to play Dungeons and Dragons.
Mhm.
Everyone wants to create a fun fantasy story with other people, and that seems to be the common denominator.
Yeah, that it's true. I often think we get a real cross section of people of various
So many
styles.
different kinds of people.
So many
Yeah,
different kinds of
absolutely,
people, and it's
which is awesome.
that unifying force of the game that brings them all together despite differences and despite that they might not interact in the real world, the
Oh yeah,
outside
the
world,
real world.
the real world, whatever that is.
I mean,
Um,
I've heard of that. You hear stories about it, right? I mean,
I don't live there. I visit occasionally when I need groceries, but
waste of time. Yeah.
yeah. And at the castle, the format of the game is different from what a lot of people experience, in the real world,
Yes.
in their
Yes, it is.
usual life. Is that a way of playing that sort of format, like intensive for multiple days back to back, or you don't have obligations and you don't have to come and go or worried about anything. Some people I know, I founded this company with my brother Cam, and he was the D&D nerd in high school, and so he was a dusk till dawn kind of player who would just I mean, he said,
Wow.
there's the people that play a lot, and he was like in the 95th percentile of the like literally all weekend, every weekend. That's all they did was play D&D. So
Yes.
he had that experience, and that was sort of the inspiration for D&D in a Castle, was to give people the opportunity to have that experience. Whether they had it before and have trouble getting it again, or they've never experienced play that way. They've either only experienced online or 2 hours on a Tuesday, or they're different ways. But how does
Oh
that
yeah.
format inform and enhance or change the game at all? How is it
Sure.
different?
It definitely has an impact on the game, and I think in two ways. One, it affects how we prep, we DMs, because we know that we're going to be there for at least 24 hours of gaming. It's often more than that. It's not 24 hours of gaming straight at most tables, but it's at least 24 hours. And that affects the stories that we plan and how we frame them and how we build them out. It also affects the prep materials that we make and the contingency plans we make when it all inevitably goes in a different direction. But the other way I think is that um, it's a really intense slice of D&D life. It really changes the quality of the experience, I think, to know that you don't have to do anything except play Dungeons and Dragons for 3 days. I mean, yes, you can go to dances, you can go to parties, you can have a meal with your friends, you can maybe learn archery if you want to try that, or you can take a tour, find a ghost, but you're there also, or maybe foremost, to play Dungeons and Dragons, and knowing that's all you got to worry about for 3 days, I think brings an intensity to it and an immersion to it that is hard to get in. Wait, would you call it the real world? Is that what you said? Yeah, yeah. I've
So-called
heard.
real
I've heard of
world.
this. I've heard of this. I've heard of this. Um, it's hard to get that outside an environment like the castle, and I think the quality it brings is a little intangible, but very, very special. Everybody I've ever talked to who's played at a castle, a D&D in a castle event, has always come away saying, that was one of the best times I've ever had in my life. I've been playing. Oop, did we just have a glitch?
I uh,
Something
I
happened. Hmm.
I think we just had a technical glitch. I'm not sure if it's on my end or yours, but there's a small glitch there. But I'm hoping that the listeners heard your comments there. There is a question here. What wine does Jason partner with his D&D in a Castle? Is it Barovian Red Dragon Crush?
Okay, Grego 72, if that is your real name. I see what you did there. Very amusing. The answer, of course, is very complicated and has multi layers, but light enough that you can enjoy it throughout the entire experience. For the ghost story game, though, for the Ravenloft game, we have to go deeper. We've got to go. This demands something a little unusual, like maybe a Nebbiolo or Carmenere oh heck, you might even go with a big red blend like The Prisoner, something that's so complicated that you'll never figure out all the secrets.
I love that. I love that. Well, we're reaching the end of our time, Jason. And I would love it if you would take us out. We're going to have a little teaser video showcasing the experience that makes us all go, oh, I want to go back to the castle to take us out. But leading into that video, I'm going to invite you to give us a pitch on your game that has a couple spots in it to anybody who may be watching. Invite the people to come and play in your game at the castle, and
Oh,
that'll lead us into the farewell video.
somewhere in Waterdeep, there's a ship. It's about to leave port, and you're on it. Where you're going and why you're going there is known to you alone. On the ship, you'll meet people. You'll become friends, colleagues, maybe enemies. But the ship doesn't go where you were intending. It's going someplace completely different. And before you know it, you're in a land of shadows and secrets, and you're the only people who can resolve this situation. So I hope you join us on this ship, leaving from Waterdeep in just over 2 months. Come join us and be one of the heroes that confronts this classic ghost story.
Wonderful. Well, start packing your bags because the ship is in the dock and it's going to sail soon. If you want to be on that boat with Jason Carl, visit dndinacastle.com. And there are live people behind the live chat there who can talk to you and answer all of your questions. Thank you so much for joining us, Jason, and we will see you at the castle.
Thank you very much, Tara. Thanks for having me. I'll see you very soon.